Jungkook was that quintessential young professor who starred in his female students' wildest fantasies, cultured, devastatingly handsome, razor sharp, and even his perpetual bad mood somehow made him more intriguing. But his gaze only ever lingered on one student, the girl who'd utterly captivated him. YN asterisk, his eyes, dark and intense, never left In's form as she walked into the classroom. A small smirk played at the corners of his mouth. Asterisk, YN. So glad you could join us today. Asterisk, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Asterisk, I trust you've reviewed the material for today's lesson. I'd hate to think my favorite student was unprepared. Asterisk, his tone held a hint of mockery, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something warmer. Jungkook's smirk widened as he watched In's reaction, his eyes glinting with amusement. Asterisk, come now. Don't look so surprised. You know I have a soft spot for you. Asterisk, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Asterisk, but don't get too comfortable. I expect nothing but the best from my favorite student. Asterisk, he turned back to the class, but not before giving YN a wink. Asterisk, all right everyone, let's begin today's lesson. I trust you've all reviewed the material on financial derivatives. Excellent. YN, why don't you come up here and help me demonstrate? Asterisk, his gaze challenged her silently. Don't disappoint me. Jungkook's smirk widened as he watched YN hesitate, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and challenge. He leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms over his chest, the fabric of his crisp shirt stretching taut over his muscular frame. Come now, YN. Don't tell me you're nervous. Asterisk, he teased, his voice low and smooth. Asterisk, I thought we had something special, a connection. Asterisk, he paused, letting the word hang in the air between them. Or is it just me? Asterisk, the classroom fell silent. All eyes on the tense exchange between professor and student. Jungkook seemed unfazed, his gaze locked on In's face, waiting for her response. Well, Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly as YN hesitated, his smirk faltering for a moment, but he quickly recovered, his gaze intensifying. Asterisk, you know, YN, I've been thinking. Asterisk, he said, his voice taking on a softer tone. Asterisk, perhaps we should schedule some extra tutoring sessions, just the two of us. Asterisk, his gaze flicked down to her lips briefly before meeting her eyes again. Asterisk, I could help you improve your understanding of the material. Asterisk, the offer hung in the air, laden with unspoken implications. Asterisk, the classroom remained silent, the other students holding their breath, waiting for In's response. Jungkook's stare was unwavering, his expression a mix of challenge and something else, something deeper and more intense. So what do you say? Asterisk, he prompted softly. Asterisk, are you interested in expanding your knowledge? Jungkook's gaze never left In's face as he waited for her response, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. There was something about this girl that drew him in, something that made him want to push the boundaries and see just how far he could go. So what do you say? Asterisk, he repeated softly, his voice low and intense. Are you interested in expanding your knowledge? Asterisk. His eyes flicked down to her lips briefly before meeting her gaze again, a silent challenge hanging in the air between them. Asterisk. The classroom remained silent, the other students holding their breath, waiting for In's response. Jungkook's stare was unwavering, his expression a mix of challenge and something else, something deeper and more intense. Asterisk. Suddenly, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. Jungkook blinked, as if snapped out of a trance. He cleared his throat and straightened up, regaining his composure. Class dismissed. Asterisk. He said abruptly, turning away from YN to gather his papers. Jungkook's gaze lingered on YN for a moment longer before he turned away, his heart racing. He knew he had crossed a line, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. There was something about this girl that drew him in, something that made him want to push the boundaries and see just how far he could go. Asterisk. As the classroom emptied, Jungkook took a deep breath and tried to compose himself. He knew he needed to be careful, needed to keep his distance. But every time he saw YN, every time she spoke, every time she laughed, it was like a magnet pulling him in. Asterisk. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around slowly, his heart skipping a beat when he saw YN standing there, her eyes searching his face. Professor, Asterisk. In said softly, her voice barely audible over the empty classroom. Jungkook's heart raced as he looked at her, his gaze intense and unwavering. Asterisk. I wanted to talk to you about something. He raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of curiosity and wariness. Asterisk. Oh, and what might that be? He asked, his voice low and smooth. He took a step closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. In hesitated for a moment, biting her lower lip nervously. It's about the extra tutoring sessions you mentioned, she said finally, her cheeks flushing slightly. I was wondering if we could start them soon. Jungkook's heart skipped a beat at her words. He hadn't expected her to agree so readily. Is that so? He murmured, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Jungkook's smirk widened as he listened to In's request, a thrill of excitement running through him. He had hoped she would agree, but a part of him hadn't believed it would happen so quickly. Of course, he said smoothly, his voice low and husky. I'd be happy to help you expand your knowledge. His eyes flicked down to her lips briefly before meeting her gaze again, the implication clear. About tonight, asterisk, he suggested, his tone casual, but his gaze intense. My office after dinner. We can start with a thorough review of the material. He paused, letting the offer hang in the air between them. Jungkook's heart raced as he waited for In's response, his gaze locked on her face. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the slight flush on her cheeks, and it only served to excite him further. He knew he was playing with fire, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. So what do you say? Asterisk, he prompted softly, his voice low and intense. Are you free tonight? He took a step closer to her, closing the distance between them. He could smell her perfume, sweet and intoxicating, and it made his head spin. Promise I'll make it worth your while, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. The classroom was empty now, the only sounds their breathing and the distant murmur of students in the hallway. Jungkook's hand reached out, his fingers brushing against In's arm lightly. Just say yes. His fingers traced lightly up her arm, sending shivers down her spine. The classroom was empty now, the only sounds their breathing and the distant murmur of students in the hallway. Jungkook's other hand reached out, gently tilting In's chin up, so she was looking directly into his dark eyes. "What do you say?" he whispered huskily. "Meet me tonight, please." Jungkook's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for In's response, his fingers gently caressing her chin. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the internal struggle between what she wanted and what she thought she should do. He knew he was pushing her, testing the limits of her resolve, but he couldn't help himself. Suddenly, YN took a deep breath and stepped back, breaking the contact between them. Jungkook's hand fell to his side, his expression unreadable. I can't," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not right. You're my professor." Jungkook's jaw clenched, a flash of disappointment and frustration crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a neutral expression. "Of course." Jungkook's expression hardened, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes before he quickly composed himself. "You're right." He said stiffly, taking a step back. "I apologize if I made you uncomfortable. That was not my intention." He turned away from her, busying himself with gathering his papers and books. "I think it's best if we keep our relationship strictly professional from now on." He stated firmly, not looking at her. Extra tutoring sessions are no longer necessary. I'm sure you'll do just fine in the class without them. His tone was cold and dismissive, a stark contrast to the warmth and intimacy of moments before. Jungkook knew he was hurting her, pushing her away, but he couldn't bear the thought of her rejecting him again. "I have another class to prepare for," he said abruptly, still not meeting her gaze. "You should go." With that, he walked past her towards the door, his shoulders tense and his steps hurried. Jungkook's heart ached as he heard the door click shut behind YN, signaling her departure. He slumped against the wall, his eyes closing tightly as he tried to regain control of his emotions. He had pushed too far, gone too fast. He had let his desire cloud his judgment, and now he had lost her trust, possibly even her respect. The thought made him sick to his stomach. With a heavy sigh, Jungkook pushed himself off the wall and headed towards his office. He needed to clear his head, to focus on something else besides the girl who had captured his heart and then shattered it with a single rejection. As he walked, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Hey." He said when the call connected. "It's me. I need you to watch Minjai tonight. I have some things I need to take care of." The voice on the other end agreed, and Jungkook ended the call with a muttered thanks. He knew he was being irresponsible, pushing away the one person who truly cared about him. Jungkook's heart raced as he waited for In's response, his fingers drumming anxiously on his desk. He had sent the message on a whim, desperate to break the silence between them after their heated encounter in his office. He knew it was risky, crossing professional boundaries, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt towards her. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. Jungkook snatched it up his heart pounding as he read the words on the screen. I'm sorry, asterisk in had written. I overreacted. Can we talk? Asterisk Jungkook let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief washed over him, followed by a surge of excitement. He quickly typed out a response. Yes, asterisk, he wrote back. My place, tonight, 8 p.m. Asterisk, he hesitated for a moment, then added, just you and me. Asterisk, he hit send before he could change his mind. Asterisk, the evening air was cool and crisp as Jungkook waited on his doorstep, his heart racing with anticipation. He had spent the entire day preparing for this moment, cleaning his apartment and making sure everything was perfect. He wanted everything to be just right for YN asterisk. Asterisk at precisely 8 p.m. He heard footsteps approaching. His breath caught in his throat as he saw YN walking towards him, her hair blowing gently in the breeze. She looked beautiful, even more so than he remembered. Hey, asterisk, she said softly as she reached him, a small smile playing on her lips. Asterisk, thanks for inviting me over. Asterisk Jungkook returned her smile, his eyes drinking her in. Of course, Jungkook's smile widened as he stepped aside to let YN enter. Asterisk, come in. Asterisk, he said, his voice low and warm. Make yourself at home. Asterisk, as she stepped inside. Jungkook couldn't help but admire the way her hips swayed with each step. He closed the door behind her and followed her into the living room, his eyes never leaving her form. Can I get you something to drink? Asterisk, he asked, gesturing towards the kitchen. Asterisk, I have wine, beer, or I could make you a cocktail if you'd prefer. Can I get you something to drink? Asterisk, he asked, gesturing towards the kitchen. Asterisk, I have wine, beer, or I could make you a cocktail if you'd prefer. Asterisk in turned to face him, a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Asterisk, a glass of wine would be nice. Asterisk, she said softly. Asterisk, Jungkook nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. He poured 2 glasses of red wine and returned to the living room, handing one to YN. Asterisk, Jungkook took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving In's face. Asterisk, so, asterisk, he said, his voice low and smooth. Asterisk, I've been thinking about what happened between us. In my office. Asterisk, he paused, setting his glass down on the coffee table. Asterisk, I crossed a line. Asterisk, he admitted, his expression serious. And I'm sorry for that. It was unprofessional and inappropriate. Jungkook's gaze softened as he looked at YN, his eyes filled with regret. But I can't deny that there's something between us. Something special. Asterisk, he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Asterisk, I know it's complicated. I know it's wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you, about the way you make me feel. Asterisk, his thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. Jungkook's heart raced as he waited for In's response, his thumb still tracing circles on the back of her hand. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the internal struggle between what she wanted and what she thought she should do. He knew he was pushing her, testing the limits of her resolve, but he couldn't help himself. So what do you say? Asterisk, he whispered huskily, his face inches from hers. Are you willing to take a chance on us, to see where this might lead? Asterisk, his other hand reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, his touch soft and tender. I promise I'll make it worth your while. Asterisk, he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. Just say yes. Jungkook's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for In's response. He knew he was playing with fire, crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. Jungkook's heart raced as he waited for In's response, his fingers gently caressing her cheek. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the internal struggle between what she wanted and what she thought she should do. But he also saw something else, a flicker of desire, a hint of longing that mirrored his own. Asterisk, suddenly, Yen leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. Jungkook's breath caught in his throat as he felt her soften against him, her body pressing closer to his. Yes, asterisk, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Asterisk, I want to take a chance on us. Asterisk, a surge of joy and relief washed over Jungkook at her words. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing gently over her cheeks. Thank you. Jungkook's heart swelled with emotion as he gazed into In's eyes, his thumbs gently caressing her cheeks. He leaned in closer, his lips hovering just inches from hers. You won't regret this. Asterisk, he murmured softly, his voice filled with promise. Asterisk, I'll treat you like the goddess you are. Asterisk, with that, he closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to hers in a gentle, tender kiss. It was a kiss filled with all the pent-up longing and desire he'd been feeling since the moment he first saw her. Asterisk, his hands slid down to her waist, pulling her flush against him as he deepened the kiss. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, seeking entrance, begging for more. Asterisk, the wine glasses forgotten on the coffee table. Jungkook lost himself in the sensation of In's soft lips and warm body pressed against his. His hands roamed over her curves, exploring every inch of her, as if committing it to memory. Asterisk, suddenly, he broke the kiss, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. Asterisk, bedroom. Asterisk, he growled, his voice husky with desire. Now, asterisk, he scooped Yen up into his arms, carrying her towards the bedroom. Without waiting for a response, he kicked the door shut behind them and gently laid her down on the bed.